My grandmother was born on the moon. Not the moon as it is now. Not Veth Station with its 4 rings and the long gun line of the Meridian Battery running 200 kilometers along the rim. But the first moon, the small one, a pressure dome and a comms relay, and 18 people taking turns at the watch because Earth below had only just begun to breathe again. That was the story she told me when I was a girl. She told it the way you tell a child about something that ended long before they were born, carefully, without drama, because the drama was too large for drama to hold. She never cried telling it. She had been born into a world that had already survived the worst thing that had ever happened to it, and she said tears belonged to people who were surprised. We were not people who were surprised. I am 31 years old. I have lived on Veth Station since I was 7, posted here at 19 as a signals analyst 2nd grade. And I have known since the morning of my first shift exactly what I was listening for. Every analyst on Veth knows. It is the first thing you are told and the last thing you check before you sleep. The Tharrek Covenant. They violated the Solace Accord 260,000 years ago. That is the number we grow up with, the number that sits at the head of every log, the number stamped above the main gallery door at the Academy of Continuous Watch in the style of a regimental motto. 260,000 years. The Covenant had been a signatory to the Accord, a formal compact between 7 spacefaring civilizations agreeing that Sol was a developing system, off limits, to be left alone until humanity reached a specified threshold of capability. The Accord had protocols, dispute mechanisms, a review timeline. The Covenant burned our first deep space colonies anyway. 17 installations across 4 systems. They did not warn us, and they did not wait. Then they withdrew, and their official position, filed with the Accord's governing body, whatever remained of it, was that the Sol system had failed to produce a viable civilization and could be reclassified as uninhabited. They expected us to fade. They were wrong about that in a way that has never been properly answered for, and every person who has ever stood watch on Veth Station has understood, without being told, that the answering was coming eventually and that it was their job to be ready when it did. I was on the 3rd shift of a standard rotation when the signal arrived. It was not dramatic. Signals rarely are. What I registered first was the identifier pattern, a Covenant frequency signature, so old the library flag on it read historical archive and auto-tagged it for review rather than alert. The system almost filed it. I caught it before it filed. I sat with it for 11 seconds, which is a very long time when your hands are not moving. Then I opened the priority channel to Station Commander Adara Voskel and said, with as much evenness as I could manage, "Commander, I have a Covenant active scan signature at outer Sol boundary. They are not approaching. They are broadcasting a query. A query. That was the word I used, and it was accurate. The Covenant fleet, I could not count individual vessels yet. The distance was too great, but the mass shadow reading was enough to make the number clear in rough terms, had come to the boundary of Sol space and stopped. And from that position, in a broadcast format so archaic that our library flag had nearly dismissed it, they were asking if anyone was there. They had phrased it differently, of course. The formal Tharrek query was structured as a civilization status request, a protocol from the old Accord framework, technically, the same framework they had violated 260,000 years ago. They were asking Sol to declare its status. They were asking, in the politest possible translation of a language we have been studying for a very long time, "Are you still here?" Commander Voskel arrived at my station in 4 minutes. She stood behind me and read the signal twice. Then she said, "Route it to planetary grid coordination and copy the full station log to the broadcast package." All of it. The full log. That is what she said. I want you to understand what that means. Veth Station has maintained a continuous, unbroken operational log since its 2nd construction phase, 251,000 years ago. Every watch rotation, every maintenance cycle, every calibration, every anomaly, every reading, every analyst who sat at station like mine and listened for exactly this and logged that they had listened and heard nothing yet. The log is not a file. It is a structure. It occupies its own server architecture, mirrored across 14 backup sites, and its earliest entries are stored in a format so old that the translation layer was rebuilt from scratch 4 times before anyone could read them fluently. It is the longest continuous institutional record in human history. We broadcast it all, every entry. The record of 251,000 years of human beings sitting at a post and keeping watch, not because anyone was making them, but because we decided this was the kind of people we were going to be. Alongside, it went the standard grid declaration package, the planetary defense architecture, the Meridian battery specifications, the current warship inventory, the orbital platform registry. 96 platforms, 41 warships of the kilometer class or above. The rebuilt colony installations at each of the 17 sites the Covenant had burned. Not rebuilt as they had been, but rebuilt as they are now, each one larger than anything the Covenant would have known in the years of the Accord, each one named after the installation it replaced and the date of its destruction. So the names would carry both the wound and the answer simultaneously. The Covenant fleet received the package. We know this because they stopped broadcasting and went silent, and silence from a fleet of that size is its own kind of statement. Commander Voskel did not leave my station. We sat together, she standing behind me, and waited. It took 9 hours. I drank 2 cups of tea. I do not remember what we talked about during those hours, if we talked at all. I remember the quiet of the room and the low hum of the systems and the light on the display showing the fleet's mass shadow sitting at the boundary and not moving. When they broadcast again, it was not a query. They opened a formal diplomatic channel and requested terms. They used the word terms. After 260,000 years, the Tharrek Covenant came to the edge of our system and asked what it would cost to resolve the matter of the Solace Accord violation. Earth's response had been prepared for a long time. Not for these specific negotiations. We did not know the exact shape of the conversation, but the terms themselves had been studied, drafted, revised, and re-ratified every generation for as long as anyone could trace the record. They were not punitive in the way you might expect. They were precise. Formal recognition of the violation. A full accounting. Every record the Covenant held about the 17 destroyed installations, every personnel log, every asset file from that period, transferred to our archive in its entirety. Reparation in the form of navigational access rights through Covenant-controlled lanes, to be held in perpetuity by the 17 colonies. And a co-signatory status for humanity on whatever governance structure had replaced the old Accord, with the same weight as any founding member. The Covenant accepted all of it. It took 4 days of formal exchange to work through the language, and there were 3 moments where I thought the channel might close, and it did not close. On the 5th day, Commander Voskel signed the documentation from Veth Station because Earth's diplomatic corps decided that the station where the signal was caught was the right place to sign it. I was still on my post. She brought me a copy of the signature page after it was done. Not a custom, not a regulation, just something she thought to do, and I held it and read it and thought about my grandmother, who was born in a pressure dome above a world that had only just begun to breathe, and who taught me, without meaning to, that there are things worth waiting for if you're patient enough and serious enough, and do not confuse waiting with doing nothing. We had not been doing nothing. The Covenant fleet departed Sol Boundary that evening, our time. I logged their departure at 2,211 hours station clock, noted the channel closure, updated the status flag in the historical archive from open/monitoring to resolve/terms accepted, and filed my shift report. Then I went to the observation ring because it was a clear cycle and the Earth was up, and I looked at it for a while. Pale blue from here. Enormous. Ringed with the faint glint of platforms, if you know where to look, which I do. My grandmother used to say, "The moon is a good place to remember from." She was right about that, as she was right about most things. I went back to my station and started the next watch.